I'm good. How are you? I don't know how you wear that all the time. Those masks. Those masks, like with the nose thing, they like drive me crazy. Don't mind them. Yeah, like make my face oily and stuff. Yeah. Yep.
7:01.
Okay, we'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So this evening, we got a couple public forums. We'll go back to back with those. We'll start with the athletic safety plan for winter sports.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Pat. So what I'll start out with is kind of giving some background on the winter sport, high-risk winter sports issue. Gavin Reagan, our athletic director, is here tonight, and both of us are going to discuss the safety plan that we've worked on, prepared, and have presented we'll be presenting to the board tonight. So in terms of background on this issue, back on January 22nd, Governor Cuomo made an announcement that high-risk winter sports could begin on February 1st. This was a bit of a surprise to many people, particularly in St. Lawrence County, because at that time, we had the highest number of COVID cases since the pandemic began last March. So when that decision was made, over the course of the following week, the regional superintendents met, the athletic directors met, and we began to collaborate with public health because the governor had announced that winter sports could go forward if the county public health departments agreed to it. And there's 62 counties in the state, so every one of them needed to, for their own county, agree to allow students to engage in high-risk winter sports. So on the 29th of January, Section 10, which is our section for athletics, announced that there'd be a pause in time to assess the situation and obtain the final guidance from St. Lawrence County Public Health, because we could not go forward unless we had that guidance. That guidance came on January 30th, and you've probably seen it by now. They came up with several recommendations. The main one that we would need to come up with a safety plan if we were going to begin the winter sports. And that safety plan would have to be approved by our medical director, as well as the Board of Education. So what you've seen over the course of the last week around the county is that superintendents, just like tonight, and athletic directors are presenting a safety plan to their boards of education and engaging in discussion with them, as well as the public that we've heard from on this issue, because there are legitimate viewpoints on both sides of this issue. We know that our students want to play sports. We know many of our seniors are missing out on a great deal of what would normally be times that they would have with their friends playing sports, and there's also been a lot of discussion about the isolation and the mental health issues of students. And So we get that. We've heard from many parents, several parents on that issue. We also know that the pandemic, although we're starting to see some decline, has not left the county. We know that many times we've had to go all remote, including this week with our high school was all remote because we had positive cases there. Now, we know it hasn't been, we have not seen cases where someone has brought the virus into school and it's spread from one person to another. The issue is when someone brings it into school, then we're into close contacts, quarantines, and soon we don't have the staff in order to keep the building open, like we had this week and the previous week at junior high and any number of times since September began. It's been an issue. We still have almost 100 cases in Messina. So these are all the things that we have to weigh out when we make a decision in order to start sports again. And that's what we've been doing pretty diligently over the last couple of weeks since that announcement was made by the governor. So I'm going to turn it over now to Gavin. You all received a copy of this safety plan. Gavin's going to run through some of the main points of that plan. We'll then open it up for the board for discussion. And then we'll be opening it up later to the public. I know on our YouTube Live, there's an opportunity for people to put some questions or comments in chat. Mike Allen, our IT director, is there. He's monitoring that and will be asking those questions or giving us those comments a little later in the meeting. We also have a couple of people who have signed up in order to call in to the board. And at 7:30, we'll have those call-ins at that time so the board can hear their perspectives as well. Gavin?
Thanks, Pat. Can everybody hear me? I'm pretty loud, so if you ask our athletes, I'm pretty loud, so.
Probably
Would you
should.
want me to stay there?
Yeah, that
for
probably
the-
did.
For the
Okay.
YouTube feed.
For the YouTube feed? Okay, great. As Mr. Brady said, everybody has had the opportunity to take a look at our safety plan. There's a lot of time and effort by Section 10, myself and a number of different athletic directors that have tried to come up with a plan that's going to give our athletes the opportunity to participate. But the number one goal is safety for everybody involved when it comes to practice and in games. We have put together our safety plan dealing with some specific groups, and you can see those from athletes to game personnel, those officials, those type of things. But I just want to go over a few key points in this to highlight for you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take any questions regarding this that you might have. There's over 100 documents to support this plan. And they've been attached, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to take a look at those. But some of the key points here, to start right off, because I've had a number of questions, and our athletics directors have had a number of questions regarding wrestling, because we're dealing with, tonight, basketball and hockey. Wrestling has been pushed into the fall 2 season, so that will be discussed after we get the winter season, if we do get that going. Because there's a number of challenges we feel around wrestling. So that has been put into fall 2. There's some information out there. People said, oh, wrestling's not going to be addressed. It's being canceled. That, at this point in time, has been moved to the fall 2 season. So we just want everybody to know that. So I'm going to go through a couple of some of the key points here that are in the safety plan. Each parent, guardian, of an athlete participating in the Messina Central School District sports will be required to sign the Section 10 COVID-19 school activity student permission form. This form will highlight the heightened risks associated with participating in high-risk sports. So everybody's going to have to sign that plan. So every parent of an athlete that wants to participate is going to have to sign that. Screening is going to be a big thing. The one thing that we instituted that's going to help us a lot is we use an Our School app So our students and staff every day screen themselves on our school app. So our athletes and parents know how that works, so we're farther ahead on that. But we'll have to screen all our athletes, whether they're learning from home or at school every day. And we will also be screening all the coaches and the officials. There's some added things that we'll be doing that we didn't have to do in the fall. For example, we still had to do the same procedure of have our athletes screened before practices and games, but it was outside. They were moderate risk sports. Now these are inside and high risk sports. There's some added things that we'll have to do. For example, at practice, we're gonna have to take temperatures of our athletes and our coaches when they get to the facilities. So there's just some added things we'll have to do. The bonus, which I said too, that we have here is we've got facial scanners that will be able to do that with our temperatures here when we're talking about basketball. So there's some things that we have in place that will be utilizing that. And like I said, we'll have the same procedures. We'll have to have our officials sign off. They will also have to have temperatures taken and those type of things and social distancing that we're doing with everybody. A big factor, because some people have asked, you know, they're saying, hey, basketball, hockey is a kind of a high intensity sports, but everybody's still going to be required to wear masks. So if you're in the venue as an athlete, an official, or a game personnel, at the whole time you'll be wearing a face mask. A mask will be mandatory. Some of that added is things that we'll be dealing with is we'll have a daily log that will require documenting all individuals who attend practice for contact information. This will be kept by the head coach. So in other words, we're going to have, if, for example, our assistant coach in hockey doesn't show up that day, obviously we'll know that he wasn't or she wasn't there that day. We will be capturing everybody that's at practice and games every day, down to if it's a game, a scoreboard person, everybody, in case we have to do any contact tracing, because that's what's being required by public health. At this point in time, we will not have spectators per the Section 10 guidelines for winter 2020-2021 until they're deemed safe and appropriate. Until this point of time, we will have basketball and hockey contests. Will be hockey in the rink. We have live barn. We're working to make sure that's up and running so people will be able to watch it there. And we purchased cameras. Mr. Brady and I talked about this, what potentially might happen. We thought we're good for fall, but now we're running into it for winter. So we purchased cameras, and the help of Mr. Allen, we will have those installed in our gym, so we'll be able to watch our games, basketball in the gym, since we will not be having spectators. And it's also, I mean, it's just like anything else, we have to let everybody know that it's important that, you know, failure to comply with these requirements of the plan will be subject the athlete or the participant to the Code of Conduct and the Board of Education policies and regulations regarding behavioral expectation on school property. So everybody's going to be required, however way we go, to be able to make sure that they abide by these things. And a second note, based on the public health guidance, is public health will be spot checking of what we're doing. So we have to make sure we're following all these procedures. Because we don't want to have ask people or athletes, tell them that, hey, if you're a worker, and you decide not to wear a mask, the last thing I want to do is tell you, hey, I got to tell you you have to leave. So everybody, but there will be consequences if you don't. So we have to do that. But those are the main things that I have on the highlighted points. But we've put a lot of time and effort into this, and we were trying to deal with every scenario that we can. One thing I will say, we are hoping to start, if the plan is approved, practices on February 22nd, once we come back to school. Section 10 of the athletic directors met today. No contests in Section 10 will start. Game contests will start in Section 10 before March 1st. So whether it's in Franklin County or in St. Lawrence County, no game contest will start before March 1st. That will give us the required number, everybody the required number of practices to be able to get their required practices in before any contest. From my discussions today, there may be some schools that start before February 22nd, and there's probably going to be some schools that start after February 22nd. But those are all, and I'll be fairly honest, really honest with that, those practice date times and days and game days are based on that we don't get any changes from public health. Public health is also put in there, they can change guidance anytime they want. I'm not trying to, I mean, so that is where we're at right now. Just so you know, Franklin County, and I'm not trying to say anything negative, they've obviously done what they need to do for their guidance, have changed their guidance 5 times in the last 9 days. So we could potentially, I mean, by the time we get to February 22nd, there could be different things that we have to do. So, and we're trying to work with that in just in case we do. So, but the main reason of starting on February 22nd, there's new guidance of you have to have COVID questions. We got to make sure if somebody has had COVID, there's some responsibility the school has to have about getting cleared by their doctor, our medical doctor. So there's just some things that we just can't rush this, and we still have plenty of time to get our practices in before our March 1st potential game start. So those are the main things. If anybody has any questions, I will try to field those questions as best I can. But if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
The number of practices is 6?
6.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So based on if we start on the 22nd, and which is also, and I probably should have said, I'll let you know that, is New York State Athletics has said, whereas usually can't, you can practice 7 days in a row if you want to. So anybody could get the practice, so you could even miss one and still get those practices in. So because of the shortened season, New York State Public Athletics has said you can practice 7 days a week if you need to.
And that's per individual athlete, right? They have to have the 6 practices.
Correct.
It's not just a team meeting.
Correct.
6 times.
Correct.
Okay.
Quick question, do you need our approval to have practice? Do you need our approval to have practice?
So,
For board members.
Oh, always.
yeah, Robert's on
Yes,
Zoom.
yes. Yes, we do. Yes. So based on the guidance from public health, our safety plan has to be approved by our school medical director, who is Dr. Romley. She has approved our plan as is. She has read it and approved the plan as is. And then the next step has to be approved by the board.
Right, and so by approving if the board approves the safety plan tonight, that is also giving the administration the go-ahead to allow students to practice and then to play according to that schedule. And I would also ask that the board, because we also need to appoint coaches, that I would be authorized, as I am in other cases, to provisionally appoint coaches, and then later the board would officially approve those coaches.
Yes.
I have a question about what happens when someone on our team or another team, let's say basketball, they have someone test positive after a game.
Yep.
Does that put our entire team in quarantine, or how are they going to contact trace in those situations?
Good question. We've talked to public health, and public health said if we have somebody that tests positive, so say for example, we all play tonight, and one, as your scenario, and somebody tests positive, they do not segregate, it's by team. So yes, our team would be quarantined, and so would the team we played against.
Okay, it could be impossible.
Yeah.
We're not within 6 feet of each other. They're definitely
Right.
going to be within.
So
6
it's
feet.
not, we're not gonna, and then they already told me, because the dynamics of basketball and hockey, they said they cannot say just one, it's everybody will be quarantined.
Gavin, we're familiar of, Mr. Tromboli sent the diagram of the hockey face mask and everything. What is going to be going on as far as masking and PPE and whatnot for basketball games?
Basketball, so we will be, obviously we'll be segregating our players, obviously separating in benches, and we'll have them more than,
Mute him.
did you ask? Oh, okay. Okay, so every player will be required to wear a mask in practice and in games. So they're gonna be required to wear a practice in games. We'll be sanitizing the balls, all those things during play. So yes, and the only time, hockey and basketball, the only time they'll be able to take their mask off is if they're socially distanced, if they can do it, and when they're hydrating, that's it.
So this is specialty equipment
Yes,
here.
yeah.
What are the basketball masks going to be specialty?
No, no,
Okay.
section 10 said, basically an approved mask that's being worn in school, you can wear the same thing if you would like, for our games.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think basketball seems higher risk to me than hockey, but with hockey, I have a concern about busing. Well, and basketball, I have a concern about busing. How are we going to do that safely? There's no way to ventilate a bus. I know we're doing with our students now, but school is more important than athletics. Secondly, how are our kids going to even dress when they get there, especially hockey? They can't be in locker rooms. How is this going to idealistically happen?
So say for example, there's obviously some schools, and you're correct, that will not be offering any locker rooms at all. They will have to go to the game dressed on the bus. The only thing they will provide them is an area that's 6 feet apart. They will have their mask on to put their skates and helmet on. To even take it one step further, there's some schools that will not let you into their facility more than 15 minutes before game time and have to leave 10 minutes after the game is over.
This is about minimizing risk, obviously. And I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but we've yet to see someone get on a school bus and spread it to another person. What happens with the issue is that if someone has it, then everybody on that bus is now quarantined and aren't.
Which would be the case anyway, because we just heard that
Right.
if one person tests
Correct.
positive.
Correct.
Correct.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So, does it say in your plan how often you're gonna make your athletes get a COVID test?
So St. Lawrence County has not, at this point in time, as we're writing this plan right now and presenting to you, St. Lawrence County is not requiring any sports team in St. Lawrence County to be tested. Franklin County, they are.
Okay, so then how do you plan on protecting your players from somebody who's asymptomatic?
Basically, based on the plan and the requirements by public health, is they're saying that we have to have our athletes socially distanced and masked the whole time and sanitizing and those type of things.
And you
That-
guys are confident that that's gonna be enough for somebody who doesn't know that they have it, who doesn't have the fever and the cough and all of that stuff?
We will be directing our coaches and our game personnel to make sure that they're socially distancing as much as they can and making sure they do all those things we're requiring by public health.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Gavin, I know for transportation, if it becomes, busing becomes an issue, we do allow parents to, out on an away game, sign their student out to ride home with the parent. I mean, have we considered having that option to get to and from games?
So basically,
I mean, just giving us another
yeah, no, and I think obviously that would be a discussion that you as a group would have to have. But in the guidance by public health, they're obviously saying we don't want to do any carpooling. So you wouldn't want to have somebody else bringing your child that's not in part of your family. That's the only guidance they have, but obviously that's a discussion that you guys would have to entertain. But no, it's a thought, sure.
Is there something that legally precludes it?
Something, no, there's
Something-
nothing,
No.
nope.
No, we're required to, we could not say to them, you can't
have to-
play
Right.
unless you drive your child to the game. We are required by law to provide the busing, but
Okay.
there's nothing that says if to get permission for a parent
Kevin,
and they sign off to.
which
Take
would,
their own child.
and piggyback on that. I will regularly have, take for example, in a regular year, hey, I have, our player is playing in Potsdam for a hockey game, and they got an orthodontist appointment in Potsdam, and mom and dad bring them to the orthodontist appointment, doesn't want to miss the game, so they drive them over the game with my permission,
Okay.
as long as we know that. So I don't see that that would be anything different. We, as Mr. Brady said, we can't require it, but
So, are we allowed to practice when we're remote, or is it just sport, the actual games that you can't participate?
neither practice or games when you're remote.
And then the other question I had was, there's a caveat in the plan that spectators are prohibited until it's deemed safe and appropriate. What's the definition of that?
That will be in consult with public health, and section 10 and the superintendents when they deem that it's safe.
So will that will be a behind closed doors meeting, correct?
I don't know if it would be behind
Will
closed
that be a
doors.
public meeting?
What, when we would allow spectators?
No, when you discuss that with public health.
Yes, generally.
So that, I guess then all we can do is talk to you about what our feelings are, or what my feelings are.
Mhm.
School's allowed to operate at a what, 50% capacity?
Yeah, I think.
There's a capacity
There's
limit, and it's
capacity.
based on a occupancy, correct?
Mhm.
I want to see this go forward, obviously. I mean, that's my thought on it. But I'd also like to have the parents, just the parents, similar to fall sports, be able to spectate. And understanding the size of these arenas, I'd like to see a calculation done before it's just dismissed out of hand, that we'd even be approaching even remotely close to a threshold of a occupancy of any space.
Well, that's a section 10 rule. It's not a rule that the district is going to make unilaterally. That's a section 10 rule for play, that we would not have spectators in the game, at any of the games. Because we can't control, we're trying to minimize the risk, we're trying to let the students play, and this is what really has been the push here, is to get the kids playing. And that's what we're trying to do, adding on that additional risk of having people there. I know we did in the fall, but it was outside, you could spread out. This is inside, and it's a higher risk.
Okay, so let's look down the road, because where we're heading, one of our next major hurdles is gonna be graduation, and I know that's quite a ways down the road. So what happens when public health says we can't attend graduation? Or will they, what, is that gonna be their decision, or is that a school's decision?
Well, actually, last year, the governor made certain restrictions when it came to, they actually came out with, if I'm remembering this right, came out with how many you could have at a graduate, or how that would work. But public health is involved in that decision.
They did just open up live venues in New York State, live sports, with a 10% capacity.
We're starting
I saw
to,
that.
yeah.
It's interesting because I thought the rule for meetings like this were 50, but is it 50 or is it based off the occupancy of the room? Kevin brought up a good point.
Well,
Yeah,
it's 50 for a public meeting right now, it's 50 people.
And the one that the governor just opened with those venues is 10% if they have a 10,000 attendance or
10,000
more.
attendant policy, yeah, that's right.
Mm.
So it's a
Could
little
these,
different.
could these games be live streamed?
That's what we're gonna
That's
do.
what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're gonna do it in the rink and at the court, in the gym. And I think, so
Which opens
also,
up some
Kevin, what the
interesting
thought process might have been
things for down the road.
around this
Kids
is that-
broadcasting games, wouldn't that be fun?
is, because of, public health has said, anybody you have in your venue, we have to capture their name, their phone number, their email address, and what county they're from. And I think the athletic directors and I can't speak for the superintendents, were thinking, with all that added things, those things right off the bat, that might be a little hard. So let's see what we can do to get our athletes going, and if we're able to do it successfully, we'll transition into that. And we didn't have those requirements in the fall. All I had to know is you were coming. And,
Okay.
but public health has said, based on high-risk sports, you have to be screened before you come. I have to get other info, name, address,
We have our
all those
first call
things. I
coming
think
in.
that's why.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, is this Angie?
Yes.
Hi, Angie, this is Pat Brady. How are you?
Hi, Brady. How are you?
Very good. You are now, have the floor for the Board of Education meeting.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello and good evening to the entire Board of Education. My name is Angela Frost, and I live here in the village of Messina with my husband Brendan and our 4 children. 1, a recent graduate of Messina, and 3 who are current student athletes in our district. First and foremost, I appreciate all the hard work you all have done to get our students and staff for the last 11 months. Because I work with the public, I understand the importance of keeping everyone safe and why certain protocols need to be in place to make that happen. But I called tonight to advocate for our student athletes and reminding the board that mental health also needs to be at the forefront in decision making. Mental health is equally as important as physical health. We are losing our kids every day, with less and less for them to look forward to. Everyone is aware of the positive impact that sports and exercise have on the students' mental well-being. It's heartbreaking to open the news every day with more and more teens committing suicide, drug overdoses, arrests, all in the name of COVID-19. The high school has been successful in dealing with each case and has been able to maintain a steady environment for the students, even when setbacks occur. Hockey players have been on the ice since October with minor hockey divisions with no cases linked to play in our area. That is because we have safety protocols in place and continue to use and follow. They are covered from head to toe in protective equipment and have electively decided to purchase and wear custom face masks to further reduce the spread of COVID-19. With at least 5 Section 10 school boards voting yes to winter sports in the last couple days, including Potsdam within the last hour, our players are holding all hope that our board will do the same. We are asking for your vote in favor of winter sports returning to our players to give them hope to make their school proud. Please vote yes. Thank you for your time, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Angie. Does anybody have any questions for Angie? Okay. Thank you, Angie. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Good night. Good night. We should have one more coming in very shortly, but we could take other questions from the board in the meantime.
I just have a question. If Franklin County's guidelines are different than St. Lawrence County's, are we going to be able to play the schools that in Section 10? There's schools in Section 10 in
Yes.
Franklin County. Are we going to be able to play those schools, or are we going to decide not to play those schools, or how is that going to work?
At this point in time, from our guidance from Franklin County, and as I said, I mean, I apologize, but they've changed their guidance a number of times. And in our guidance, they want you to be contiguous. So it's looking like right now, Franklin County will be playing strictly in Franklin County.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, it's Mike Trimboli.
Hi, Mike. How are you? It's Pat.
Good, good. Just let Gavin talk here. I can wait to come on unless you've got other people backed up behind me.
No, that's all right. I think, Gavin, did you finish your?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, no, we're ready for you, Mike. You have the floor.
Okay. You hear me okay, Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to, it's Mike Trimboli calling. I just want to call into the meeting. I sent all the information out to everybody this week concerning the safety and the protocols and the facts regarding how to conduct hockey in a safe manner and how it's been done locally, both at the Messina Arena and all other area facilities within Section 10 since August without any issues. And just in case there was any questions from anybody or any clarifications that were needed, and I just want to commend the athletic director, the superintendent, everybody that had a hand in the well-written, comprehensive 15-page safety plan that's been put together.
Anything else, Mike?
Nope, I just didn't know if anybody needed any further clarification or anything. The helmet is there that shows the mask attached. We purchased those for the team. We have those. Water bottles are all purchased, and they have the players' numbers on them. And the transportation issue, presently the district picks up students on a regular basis, and they don't know what they've done since they last picked them up. And there's risk involved in everything we do. And as people in leadership positions, we just need to meander through the negative culture of what ifs. They'll look for reasons why we can't do things and find a way through supported facts and documented research, following the evolving science to safely make things happen for the right reasons, whether it's a popular decision or not. The sport has had proven success over the past 6 months, shown that it's not a nexus to transmission, and we ask that you give us a chance to continue the success following your established safety plan. Thanks for your time. If nobody has any questions.
Any questions for Mike? All right, thank you, Mike.
Good luck.
1 second, hold on.
Oh, sorry, yep.
I just want to thank Mike for the document that he shared with the board. It's very interesting, very good. I feel that the hockey players will be protected with the effort and the preparation that he put into this. Appreciate what he shared.
Okay, Mike, so Robert, one of our board members who's on Zoom tonight, just wanted to thank you for the report that you sent to the board. Felt it was well written and laid out the issues very well.
Thank you. It's also positive to know that the rolling average is down at 2.9. So thanks for your time, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. So that concludes the those who will be calling in, but we may have some on the chat. But, are there other questions from the board before we get to the chat?
I have a question. Will both sports, hockey and basketball, will they be carrying like full rosters as they would without COVID? Like having so many kids dressed, being able to socially distance on benches, especially in the arena. Those are big kids with a lot of pads with a little bit of room on the bench.
So it's section 10 in NISFA has limited game participation for hockey to 20 players. So they've reduced the roster down to 20 players. They will be the only ones that will be able to participate in games.
So like a final roster of 20, or say you have 20 that can dress for that one game, but then there's 5 other skaters that in the event.
Right. So yeah, most people, so right now the arena is letting teams in minor hockey, and obviously we have to balance between the arena, it's not our facility, and public health and what we want to do and what section 10. So game days, we will only have 20 athletes dressed. Whether there's 25 of them, those other 5 are not coming in the building.
Okay.
Only 20 will. When it comes to practice, and and Coach Trimboli and Coach Paquin and I have had these discussions, if you're going to carry more, we're probably not going to carry more than about 25, 26, because that's what the rink is allowed to have on the ice. So if we have those extra 5 or 6 players for practice, they are also going to have to socially distance, and we're going to try to make sure we're keeping them kind of off the ice in pods, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But the tough balance is, hey, you can say you want to put them on pods off the ice, but if you scrimmage and somebody tests positive, as which was said before, all 26 of them, if they were there, are going to be quarantined. But when it comes to game days, all we're going to do is travel with 20 players, home or away. And the other players, unfortunately, will not be able to be in the building home or away.
40 players total.
Excuse me?
40 players total.
No, oh yeah, from each team.
40
Yes,
players
yeah,
total.
from 20 from each team, yes, correct.
What's the length of season that you foresee?
I
For
foresee,
both sports?
so I foresee, and that's kind of a variable, because we did set an absolute end date for basketball and hockey. You can end it early, but the absolute end date for basketball and hockey have to be finished by March 31st. You can end it early because as I started my discussion about fall 2, there's a fall 2 season that could potentially be going on. And Mr. Brady and I and the superintendent, my opinion, which will probably happen, is different schools will end their winter season at different times, depending on if they're having a fall 2 season, because those athletes, we won't have enough athletes to go into that other season and play 2 seasons all at once. But we'll be looking at that. So it's up in the air right now. I feel very confident we will not be ending before the 21st of March, but we could go all the way to the 31st, depending if what sports we have in fall 2.
So I'm going to just say I agree, and Mr. Trimboli is correct, the science and all of this is evolving. But I think that as a district, we need to be consistent too. And I respect the fact that we support athletics. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and I was very average at all 3. But also, the music program was very important to me. If we're going to say it's okay for kids to play basketball and hockey, I would like to see a way that we can safely have a musical, because we can't say it's okay for high-risk sports and then tell them they can't have a musical. That is not consistent. So I'm just bringing that point up now. I will be asking for that to be looked into at new business.
And for me, it doesn't even necessarily end with, a musical, and that's, something that's near and dear to my heart for sure. But, are there co-curricular activities that we could be looking at that could provide, the mental health aspect for the non-athletes, or the kids that are musical, or the kids that are are we doing robotics? Are we doing, a lot of things that are enrichment activities or co-curricular activities, but are not athletic, and don't have that, advocacy group necessarily that's stepping forward to really, encourage officials to let them play.
This is encouraging, this discussion, because this virus isn't going anywhere. And we've stifled our whole life, at first, to hide based on unknown fears. And we're going to have to figure out a way to get past all that and how to function within these parameters. And I hope it's sooner than later.
Well, we've been functioning within the parameters of public health and State Department of Health, and that's part of the reason public schools have been as safe as they have been in not spreading it once students and staff come in. But I'd love to see the classrooms full again, but we can't do that at this point because of the guidelines we have with social distancing, et cetera, and these extracurriculars too.
But is public health stopping those other extracurriculars, such as the musical?
It comes down to the fact pattern of having the people in a space and distancing them, because if you're in and you're singing in that, then you're now 12 feet apart, and how can you, there's some logistical issues of trying to do a musical when people can't come together in one space. I know Chris is here tonight, actually.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Right,
Can
we
you do
just
it
figured all
outdoors?
this out for athletics.
Right.
I feel like we
The
could
point
come
I'm
up
not
with-
saying no, I'm just
No.
saying there's other logistics here that we
Just-
have to figure out.
Just one point I want to make. Athletic breathing is as dangerous as singing. That is a fact. And the word athletic breathing does exist. I'm sure you've seen it. It is so if we're saying it's okay for them to be this close on the basketball court, how can we say they can't be that close on a stage?
Especially when they're wearing the controls that are supposedly to work, such as a mask. You know what? Eventually, we're going to have to just figure it out and there's nothing we can do that has no risk. And how we're talking about quite a large gap of kindergarten through upwards of 12th grade, where the gaps that are going to be created based on this pandemic and this change in education is going to be far-reaching beyond any of this, and it's not going anywhere. We've got to figure out how to move towards things that are better for them, as far as public health will let us, and then maybe even give them a little shove.
think they did get a little shell with the athletics, right? I think there was enough parents and coaches that said we need to figure a way to do this, and that prodded public health to listen and allow us to come up with a plan. So I don't know, from the music side, if they can come up with technology, microphones under the mask type of thing, you know, I don't know, but.
Do it outdoors and video it. Do it on a soccer field and video it.
Well, coming from some, I actually had COVID. I came down with it, it's been 12 days now. I'm cleared through the county and public health and everything else. I work in a facility that you have to have close contact in certain areas. Much like the sports that we're talking about or any of these programs, they have all types of things in place to try and keep this from spreading and not having it happen, and there's been cases throughout the place that I work in. Following the CDC guidelines and doing everything that we can to the best of our abilities to help stop the spread is the best thing that we can do. But it's going to be there. It's hitting, it's happening. I mean, I didn't think I'd get it. I was following everything. The places that I work, they actually come in and they steam the whole rooms when you're out working and stuff to try and eliminate if it happens to be in there and stuff. They take extra precautions and stuff, but it's still there. It's something that we're gonna have to deal with and try and move forward with, and I just.
Yeah, like I said, it is with us. We still have about 100 cases in Messina right now. We seem to be still a bit of a hot spot. Hopefully that's gonna come down. We're getting our staff vaccinated more and more. Hopefully that's also going to be impactful. I see the CDC has come out with some guidelines that if you've had your 2 shots and 2 weeks have passed since your second shot, you won't have to quarantine for up to 90 days.
Right.
Those measures will be helpful to us because what happens is when someone comes in and then we have to quarantine, it's not the spread that's hit us at this point. It's been the quarantine. And then you don't have, as I said, the staffing, and then you're impacting students having to be home, having to be remote, and it impacts the family. So those are the reasons, you know, the issues that we've been dealing with. But as far as sports, we haven't, like I said, in school with the measures of the mask and doing your best with distancing and hand sanitizing and the things that will come into the safety plan, it's all about minimizing the risk of spreading it.
So, understanding, I recently received a call to let me know that one of my children was going to be put in quarantine by the school. The school's doing the contact tracing?
They are, because public health does not have the capacity to do it. We have to start with the contact tracing and then let public health know. Collaborate with them and ask them. We call public health after and say, okay, this is what we've been told. Here's where this person was, who they were around, how long they were in there, all those factors, and then they help us to make a decision whether that person has to quarantine or not. Otherwise, to wait for public health at this point, it could be, you know, a week. And that's not it's just the capacity.
Do we need an intermunicipal agreement with them? Because our employees are doing their work. Is that required?
That's to keep our people safe. We don't have an intermunicipal agreement with them, but if we don't do those measures, then, you know, we're risking more safety for our students and staff.
Is it me?
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say, if public health doesn't have the capacity to do contact tracing, that means that St. Lawrence County is out of control. There's too many cases in St. Lawrence County to have a lot of the activities that we're currently having.
That's it.
Other questions, comments?
To me, the only real silver lining to this, I really came in here tonight not really wanting to approve this, but it's very detailed and very well done, and you're to be commended, you and everybody that worked on it. But the thing that is making me feel a little better about it is that we don't start until March 1st, because I think we do need some more time to hopefully get things going in the right direction as far as COVID cases are concerned, just to, you know, be that much safer. So, good job on the plan.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have any chat out there?
No, it's pretty good. There isn't any chat, but just for one note, we've had about 70 viewers so far that are tuned in. So.
Okay.
No questions, though?
Nope, nothing on chat.
Anything else from anyone? Anybody in the room?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, coming from a student aspect of this, like, I feel like we're all just so eager to just be in the gym, like, finally get to touch your stick, like, get your volleyball, get whatever, and be on the field. Like, I think we all understand the risk, and we're willing to take whatever precaution necessary to keep everyone safe. So would you be willing to, even if the, like the competition side of stuff doesn't work out, would you be willing to at least just let us hold practices?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that was something that I was thinking about really advocating hard for. I don't like the, I think Lauren's absolutely right. Basketball has the potential to be a disaster. And I was, you know, I played basketball in high school. I love basketball. But, you know, you're going to get fouled and your basket is going to be all over the place and you're going to be spitting on guys and gals, and, you know, that's just the way it is. And it's in a smaller room than an arena. And I'd be thrilled to see that happen if the teams would, you know, not play games and just work on their skills. I think that's a great compromise.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, like, this is my last opportunity to compete in some of these sports before college, and I know that I plan on playing at least one of them in college. So at this point, I really wouldn't mind not competing. I just really would like to be in the gym so I could improve skills and, like, at least get that experience one last time.
You got my vote.
Just telling Delaney, Mr. Brady and I have had that conversation a number of times too.
Yeah,
and we're looking, I mean, as we look forward to other things too, that if we get to a point that we decide we can't offer a sport, and I'm not saying we are, but we're trying to look at some other options if we can't offer that sport to keep athletes engaged and safe.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, I know it's not obviously as high as a risk as the sports we're discussing, but I'm currently on the rifle team and we've been competing since January. And I can tell you, you know, when we're shooting, it's only 4 people instead of, we used to shoot 8 at a time. And we're not 6 feet, we're 3 feet, but we do wear our masks and we take all those precautions. And we haven't had any problems, and we actually just set a record for our team. So it was really nice to be back with those people again. And we definitely had a great season. So we were really thankful to have it.
And that's a great point. And to commend this group, obviously Mr. Brady and I had that discussion early on because we're the only team in school in Section 10 that has it. And it was, so I did some research of what level risk it was because it wasn't out there. And it was something we could participate in, and we went to the range and talked about them, about social distancing and all the things that you guys are doing to be able for you guys to allow to shoot. And so people might or may not know it's virtual, so you shoot there and match scores with somewhere else. But anything we can offer, obviously we try to offer, and you're right, it's been a great success, and Coach Sanchez and you athletes have done a great job. So.
Yep, so we just wanted to say thank you from the rifle team.
Okay.
Thanks. We also have a letter that was sent to us by Brandon Downs, who is the varsity basketball coach for the last 3 years, but he's been in our program 15 years and also been a first grade teacher with us for many, many years. I won't read through the whole letter, but he just describes that, you know, he was skeptical that we could reopen safely the schools this year, but we were able to do so. He's seen how hard the district has worked to get our students here on a daily basis, and he said he was confident with diligence, focus, and teamwork that the boys basketball program will maintain all the guidelines set forth. Although it won't be easy, it is a challenge we are ready for, a challenge we know it is worth for the sake of our student athletes' physical and emotional well-being. He says, I don't envy the decision you need to make. Please be rest assured that the Messina boys basketball program recognizes the weight of your decision and is ready to support that decision, no matter what the outcome might be. And he just says thank you. Any other comments or questions on athletics and the safety plan? Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you, Gavin.
So our next public forum, couple tonight, is on our 21-22 budget. So again, I'll kick it over to, are you gonna kick it off?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick this off. I just have Angie, there you go, Angie, thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna get my head out.
Take the opportunity to stand up.
So, I'm gonna come up to the podium. So the Finance Committee met tonight and continued our discussion and planning for the 2021-22 budget. It's still very much in the preliminary stage. This is our first opportunity to present our work tonight to the board and to the public about where we are with the budget. I would say this is probably one of the more complex years that schools have had in order to put a budget together. You have the complexities of aid that's been withheld from us for transportation, for aids and assistance. You have stimulus bills, federal money that came in this year is going to be gone next year, new federal stimulus money that is coming in. The state is cutting aid, at the same time backfilling with federal aid, and the concern that down the road, when the federal aid is gone, if the economy does not rebound, that we could be looking at a cliff that we saw back when we went through the Great Recession, which many of us in this room lived through at that time. So there's a lot of issues here in preparing this budget. I want to give you a first look at it. You can see the factors that are impacting the budget deficit. The state had a deficit even before, by about $6 billion even before before the pandemic. Obviously, during the pandemic, the governor's proposal and federal aid. Next slide, please. So this gives you some background on the state budget. The state budget, as I said, was $6 billion in deficit, and then it was plunged even further with COVID. And a lot of data here, but the projection was this year we would add $91.1 billion in federal revenue, state revenues coming into the state, and that got projected down to $73.3 billion, a huge deficit. On the good side, that now the new information, new numbers that have come out, it's at 83.5, but that's still way less than the 91. So that's something that they're dealing with. And you can see on here also the deficits that the state is projecting over the next few years that they're going to need to deal with. And unlike the federal government, the state has to balance its budget. We also had initially this year, the governor said he was going to start withholding 20% of our aid. He started to do that. Then he stopped. and now we're being told that we should be getting that aid back before the end of the year, except as I'll show you the transportation and aid and assistant aid. This is a look at the governor's proposal. It's actually, he's proposing $2.1 billion in total aid, but a lot of that is federal aid because he's actually decreasing state aid by $607 million. And you're going to see two areas where we're seeing a reduction. 1.35 billion called a local district funding adjustment, an LDFA. Get used to that term. You remember the GEA? This is what that gap elimination adjustment was back in the Great Recession, and we'll probably be seeing that for a while. So that's a cut of $1.35 billion in aid, and he's backfilling it all with federal money from the stimulus. Foundation aid, that's our main operating aid, will be frozen for the second year in a row. Next, please. The governor has also recommended that they take many of our what we call categorical aids. Those are aid that we spend for services this year, say on transportation or BOCES or high cost aid for special education, and then we get the aid the following year. He wants to put those all into one, and he's looking at cutting $693 million. I'll talk about transportation aid. There's no change in community schools aid. I'm glad to see that's been a successful program for us here in Messina, community schools, and we haven't got an increase in that since we started getting it about 4 years ago, but at least it's still there for us. So the governor is, he's taking all the federal aid that he's receiving now through stimulus and putting it into the first year. He could take it and put it into more than 1 year, but at this point he's putting it into the first year, and it looks like in hopes that the new federal stimulus money coming from, that would come from the new President Biden and the Congress would help us out in the year after, and maybe the year after that. Next slide, please. These are the services aid that I talked about that are going to be cut. One of our concerns with this is that there's not many things in state aid that's predictable. We can't tell from year to year how much foundation aid we're going to get, our main operating aid. In fact, we should be getting $9 million more if it ran on formula than it is now. We don't know from year to year, but one thing we can usually count on is those categorical aids. Nick does a good job predicting. We get reports, projections, and our concern is if he takes all those, puts them into one, it'll end up like foundation aid where we won't know from year to year what we're going to get in these different aids, and that's a concern for schools. Next slide, please. This just shows you, as I show you many times, a formula that if foundation aid ran, we would be getting $9.18 million, and we probably wouldn't have to worry about much of anything and could provide more opportunities for our students. Transportation aid. This is a worry here. Back in March, when the pandemic hit and we shut down across the state between March and June, the idea was we were going to keep all the state, the federal government were saying, keep employees working if you can, keep them working. And that's what we did with our bus drivers. Some of them were transporting food, they were transporting equipment and those types of things, in the full expectation that we would receive the aid on that the following year. And we get 90% of our transportation aid costs are aided by the state. So that's a lot of money, and that's important to us. Come September, we find that they're not going to pay us that aid because the drivers weren't driving students. And these are what are called standby costs. And right now we stand to lose over $500,000 in aid this year because those bus drivers weren't driving. So that's a concern for us. Next slide on the one-to-one aids. Very similar situation. We receive aid on aides and assistants who are supporting our students, and because those students were not in school from March to June, and we kept them employed doing other things, we are looking at the possibility of not getting aided on that either, and that's $400,000 projected. And that doesn't count, that's just last year. We still don't know whether there's going to be issues with transportation aid or these one-to-one aids, aid this year. So specifically for Messina, let's see, property tax cap. Okay, property tax cap. The property tax cap is not a 2%, it's not a flat cap, not a flat aid. It's derived by the consumer price index or 2%, whichever is lower. Because inflation has been lower, we're looking at a CPI of 1.23%. So the tax cap is 1.23%, not 2%. And then there's, it's an 8-part formula where you look at if you have any tax growth, you look at whether you used all of your tax cap the previous year. It's a pretty complex formula, as Nick will tell you. And actually for Messina, because we have not used, over the past few years, we've gone out with 0%, 1%, last year 2%. There's a lot of cap space there, and so we could actually go out with a 3.13% tax levy increase. And we haven't set the board, this is a discussion the board has to have. Right now in the budget, we've just put a 1% in there for now until the board makes a decision. This is the state aid for Messina. You see our foundation aid is frozen. Top line, with no increase in our operating aid. Our expense-based aids, those ones I mentioned previously, we're looking at an increase of $125,000, but we should be getting another $414,000. But it was cut. As I said at the top of the presentation, those aids have been projected to be cut. Understand this is the governor's proposal. Now the legislature is working, and they'll come out with their own ideas, and then the governor will have to sit down with the legislative leaders from the Assembly and Senate and make a final decision. You'll see our building aid is increased, and there's a reason for that. We are in the midst of a $49 million capital project, and we did phase 1 last year, and we are going to see some aid this year. And so you'll see on our budget, on the expense side, there'll be money in there for interest, principal, and on the aid side, we'll get that money back on the aid side. So that's be about $761,000 there. So our total increase, if you look at both the capital aid and everything else, it would be $2.2 million. Again, that looks, if everything goes well, that looks pretty good for next year. But there are some factors there, as I said, almost $1 million that we could be losing in transportation aid and also in the aids and assistance. This next chart just shows you the total state aid minus building aid. You see last year in 2021, our state aid went down. It was backfilled with federal money, but it went down last year. Next slide, please. You see some of the cost drivers here, salary and benefits. The money we're paying into employee pensions with ERS is going up $121,000. Teacher retirement system, $119,000. Workman's comp is going up a bit. Actually, the workman's comp budget for the county is not going to increase, but every school, based on their history, gets they get an increase or decrease based on their particular history. Ours would be 2.6%. You'll see health insurance has been stabilized over the last couple of years. We're not looking for a big, actually we're decreasing the budget a bit on health insurance because of the money we have in the budget and a low, we're looking at we had a meeting yesterday looking at a 2% increase overall in the health insurance plan. So total benefits 1.5%. And then these are just some graphs showing where TRS and ERS have gone up over time. This is a 5-year rolling average. And when you have some tough times and the stock market goes down and those investments go down, which the retirement system is heavily invested in the market, you start to see them calling for more of an increase from employers like schools to pay for it. So big time in the recession in around 12, 13, 14. And you starting to see those ramp up a little bit. Health insurance is the next slide, and you can see that has been increasing, but we're starting to see that level off a little bit, and we're hoping to see that continue that way over the next couple of years. Next slide, please. We have the projected revenues and expenses. This is showing that our budgeted expenses for 21-22 at 56.5 million. You'll see the tax revenue, that's with the 0.99%, less than 1% in there. Interest and earnings. Interest rates right now are bottom, and that impacts our budget. That's why you're seeing a drop of $300,000. This is the time, I guess, you'd say to get a loan because the interest rates are pretty low. And some miscellaneous revenues, then you see our state and federal aid there. So we're looking at budgeted expenses of 57.9 million. You see the revenues up above, and the gap is the 1.4 million, and that's what we would use fund balance for. Next is a staff breakdown, and that's just for your, kind of get a sense of where our staffing is. We have 431 employees, and about half of those are teachers, counselors, teacher aides, and you can see the rest. Well, obviously, about 70% of our budget is we're people business, so staff and salaries and benefits. Appropriated fund balance. This is the gap I mentioned before. You see at the top the minus 1.46. That means that we would use 1.46 million to balance the budget. You can see last year it was 2.26. That's going in the right direction. If everything works out for us, that we would use less of our savings, less of our fund balance to balance the budget this year. But again, these are, I want to caveat, these are preliminary numbers. We are in February. The state passes the budget April 1st. We should have better numbers at the beginning to middle of March. This is an interesting graph on the tax levy history. Let's look at 2021. The one you see there is the blue bar is last year when the board passed the budget, they said we're going to have a 2% tax levy increase, 2%. However, when the tax rate was set in August, because of an increase in property tax values, we actually saw a decrease in the tax rate overall for our taxpayers. You can see the year before, it was the same. We went out with 0, I think that year, and we ended up with a tax rate decrease. And you can see that that happens often. I did not put, next please. Usually we talk about budget requests and needs and so forth. I haven't put that up this year. There are obviously some needs we have. We are concerned about the gaps that are going to be created. That was mentioned earlier, academic gaps, mental health issues, and so forth. So we didn't request additional staffing, but we feel we can use some of the monies that we have in the budget already to repurpose them and look at providing additional supports, particularly rechanneling them for students who are at risk of not meeting the state standards. Our school advocacy is the next slide, these are some of our top 5 recommendations: updating and phasing in the foundation aid formula, amending the tax cap. This is something that Kevin had asked about earlier, the reserve fund flexibility. We'd like to see school, because we're going to be going through possibly some tough times here, many schools are, is the state to allow some flexibility in how we use our reserves. Most of them have specific rules on how they're to be used. We want to see a little more flexibility. And also flexibility in hiring. One of the things we are concerned about, if you remember during the recession, when about 2 years in the 10-11, 11-12 school year, when it was hitting us the hardest with the gap elimination adjustment, schools were cutting staff. That was the time I was in Potsdam. We cut 50 staff and ended up in a merger study with Canton to try to find a way out of it. And I know here, many members who are on this board also had to cut staff. There were 11,000 teachers cut in the Great Recession across the state. We are still feeling that. We still can't field teachers in specific areas because of the cuts and because people didn't go in the field. And that's one of my biggest fears is if we go through this again, we don't want to get that off that funding cliff, because if we go through this again, it's going to be very difficult for schools in New York State, and that impacts our kids. So that's pretty much it. There's your senators and legislators to contact. And finally, these are some important dates coming up. We have the public forum tonight. We're going to have another public forum March 18th at the board meeting. We should know a little more information by then. The board would adopt the budget on the 19th of April. And we'll have a hearing then on May 6th. And then the budget vote statewide is May 18th. And we still don't know yet what that vote is going to look like. And I hope it's not what it looked like last year with every person getting a absentee ballot. I hope that we have more open voting. This would be my prayer for that.
Gave us good numbers, though.
What's that?
A lot of people voted.
A lot of people did vote. Yes, they did. Yep. All right, that's a lot. Any questions from the board?
I guess I have one. So you mentioned that you don't have a lot of, because of the uncertainty of the revenues and so forth, you haven't, you're not anticipating a lot of additional, add-ons into the budget.
Right.
What about takeaways from the budget? Is that still an open question, or have you gotten everything from, as far as your recommendations for different areas, from the administration, and now you're just kind of waiting to see what the state does end up providing?
We're waiting on that. We're not looking at taking away. We have a pretty lean budget, and I think we've shown that, and there are state indicators I've shown the board before of really how lean we are with our budget. And we know we're going to go into a period where we need more resources to support. So we think we have, if we get the aid that we're supposed to get and we don't get the big, reductions in the other aids, that we'd be in a position to repurpose some of our monies that are already in the budget. Positions we haven't been able to fill, really, is what it comes down to, and repurpose those to provide some additional support particularly for those kids who are going to be struggling and need, with their academics after this.
At where the governor wanted to group all those individual funds of BOCES and what have you, the School Board Association came out against that.
Mhm.
Right? Aren't there other advocates that are against him doing that kind of thing with the budget?
It's one that's top of the list. It came out with a similar plan last year, and the legislature did not support it. We're hoping that this same plan, that it's not supported. We just need some level of predictability in our budget, especially for high-needs rural districts like Messina that rely heavily on transportation aid and BOCES aid. What could happen here is if you don't get the BOCES aid, which is to push to have sharing, if that doesn't become profitable for districts, they may, there's a possibility there may be less of that, and that's not good either.
The reason it exists is because you can't afford to do a lot of those things yourselves.
On their own, right? Okay. All right, thanks, everyone. Mike, do we get any chat on that? Okay. Can we do the capital project, guys?
Yeah. So on our We're gonna change up the order again to get our capital project people here. We'll go ahead and get them on and so they can get out of here before we.
So we have Ed Bernhauer, you all know Ed.
Hello,
everyone. Architect from IBI, and Rob Gray from CNS, our construction manager.
And what we thought we would do today too, this evening, since we know there is a lot on the agenda and there's a lot of information, we've provided some kind of updates as we've been going through the capital improvements and a lot of the different things that the district's engaged in now with their facilities. So really that's for the information for the board and the public to kind of go through and really we're here for any questions. We just wanted to summarize a few things tonight really quickly and not really go slide by slide, but kind of just give you an overall summary of where we're at, because we have a lot of similar updates from what you've seen in the past. So I think I'll turn it over to Rob and he'll just give you a quick update on phase 1, where that stands, and where we are with phase 2 at this particular point.
Thank you, Ed. Well, I'm sure you're not surprised that not much work's going on outside. In phase 1.
Guys, can you use the mic? They're having a hard time hearing on YouTube.
You have to get
Can you
the
just
mic.
go to the volume right there? Thank you, Rob.
As I just said, I expect everybody understands there's not much going on in phase 1 outdoors right now in Messina. So that work is obviously on hold. But there is one big point that we did have a very successful rebid on our roofing portion of phase 1. And every contractor is still ready to jump into it, obviously, as soon as the weather breaks. Phase 2, IBI has completed their estimate, and CNS has completed our own independent estimate, and we're going to be consolidating and coordinating those over the next week or so. We do what's called a constructability report and review for our phase 2 project, which is still an SCD. Ed can get into that. And what we'll do is we'll dovetail our comments and work with IBI. And the great benefit is we've had a very close relationship over the last year plus with the district and the architect. So there aren't going to be that many strange things because we know what everybody else has been doing and what their thought processes were. And that's a great advantage here. We're also working into a very detailed, what's called the critical path schedule and a phasing schedule. And obviously this all correlates to how we do the work and when we do what work in what space. It's complicated. It's like 3D chess on the run. But we've got a very good approach, and we're just fleshing out some details with the architect. And in fact, we're having a meeting with the district's team tomorrow morning to dive into that a little bit more closely. In phase 3, we're just waiting for some documents, work those into our overall master plan.
Thanks, Rob. And as we said, for those of you who may not know, we did have that bid opening this afternoon, and it was a very successful opening. We had good participation from contractors, and the bids for both roofing contracts, roofing contract 1 and roofing contract 2, came in right on budget. So we're in very good shape to proceed forward. So we're really happy about that. Also, too, as Rob was saying, currently phase 2 is at SCD under review, and we've answered and coordinated with the third-party reviewer for their comments, so that piece is done. Now it's on to the QA/QC approval. As soon as we get that back, that really gives us our commissioner's approval so that we can go out to bid. And so we're anticipating that should be very shortly coming here in the future. Phase 3, as Rob was saying, is on the design boards right now. We are anticipating shortly that will be going to SED in the next few months here. And so that's our kind of the overall schedule for that. Once again, that's work that's a bit further out. So that's not for this coming summer, but further for future summers. And so we're in good shape progressing with that. I did want to just mention real quickly too, you'll find in the information that we provided to the board, the capital outlay projects. We did have one change on our current capital outlay project. We were hoping to get some work done for the fuel station at the transportation center this coming break next week. Unfortunately, we could not get the dispensers in time from the manufacturer. Again, they're seeing COVID delays along with a lot of the other manufacturing companies that we've been working with. The good part is we have plenty of opportunity to still get that done because we were ahead of the curve as far as the schedule. This work doesn't really have to be completed until June, and so we're now targeting your April break for that work. And it's a 10-day window of construction that we're going to have for that, so we're just ready to go for that next opportunity. Also, as part of your packet, you'll see that we have begun planning the next capital outlay project, and that will actually be a telephone system improvement and upgrades. We've reviewed this with the facilities committee and with the administrators, and along with Mike Allen's help, we have all the kind of technical details, and we're ready to jump into the design boards for that. Once again, capital outlays, as you may know, that will be part of the upcoming budget vote. And so we'll prepare the documents, but we really can't go out to bid for that particular piece until this May's budget vote is passed.
This building, high school?
It's district-wide. It's the entire district,
Oh,
yep.
wow, for $100,000.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the terminal equipment is already in place. This is the main head end of the system that's getting upgraded with some server components. And I'm looking at Mike Allen to make sure I said that right.
Yeah, this isn't phone receivers or anything. It's
Yeah.
main phone
And actually,
system.
one of the nice things too, just so everyone knows, it dovetails very nicely into our capital improvements as well. As you know from our previous presentations, we're tying our new public address system and our new safety and security systems into the InformaCast backbone so that it's a unified messaging system, so all of those different pieces work together. This will also work with this capital outlay project for the phone system as well. So it basically ties in together. So any questions on any of our facilities improvements or items that we're working on now?
So one point of information is, as I mentioned in the board update with the roofing rebid, the board would review that bid and at the next board meeting, because it was just done today. They needed, a day or two to go back to the contractor, make sure that everything is accurate, and then they'll make their official recommendation to us and we'll send it on to you. But I would agree it was a good bid day.
Yes, yeah.
And
actually, we're very confident, as Mr. Brady said, we like to vet out all of the bids to make sure that they're accurate. A lot of times too, it's very stressful for the contractors getting the information together, so sometimes errors are made in putting the bid together and they have to withdraw their bid. Well, the great news this afternoon was not only is our low bidders within budget, but also the next low was very close behind them, so they're also in budget. So even if there's something like that that may happen, we're ready to go. We're actually in very good shape, so.
Can I ask who the apparent low bidder is?
Yeah, at this time, the apparent low bidder is A.W. Farrell.
For both contracts. Both roofing contracts.
Who's the second? Who was after him?
I believe it was PTL for one of the,
Contracts.
two.
Right, and then RSI for contract one.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
They're very competitive.
Okay. Any other questions? So roofing, and hopefully we're going to be out to bid very soon on phase 2. It's in the last stages with state, and then we'll get it out on the street and hopefully have another successful bid day with that contract.
Yeah. And actually, I'll let out a trailer for your next board meeting, if you do have some time, is we will have the BCS completed at that point as well. So if I can steal some of your time at your next board meeting, we can also take a look at the building condition survey results.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on the capital project? If not, we're gonna jump back up on our agenda, up to Roman numeral 8 for approval of our minutes from our last board meeting, January 14th.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion, changes, questions? All those in favor then, please? Thank you. I don't have any board correspondence, so again, we just did the capital update, but Kevin, if you got anything from, to add from facilities?
Yep, they checked most of the boxes, but there were a couple items that they didn't talk about. We had a water main break at Madison Elementary in early January. That's been repaired, but we're looking to, I don't know as though it's a long-term fix, but we're looking to replace the line in the next phase, in the next trying to add that into that capital project work that's coming up this summer. And there's discussions about a sidewalk addition at the junior high to try to funnel kids all the way to the, is it Prospect going up there? Is that the right?
Prospect to Highland.
Yeah, to extend that sidewalk, and we're gonna do our part, but there's a private homeowner in there that the village is gonna look at installing a sidewalk, and Robert is knows that individual and was gonna speak with him. I don't know where we're at with that. That's about it.
Okay, Policy Committee, Mr. Haggett.
The Policy Committee met on January 28th. We looked at draft policy 3421, which is Title IX and sex discrimination, and that is on the agenda tonight for first reading. It's a new and very comprehensive policy that's required by education law for schools that receive federal funds. Most of them do. Title IX refers to a 1972 federal education law that mandated equal access to things like athletics and academic programs for everyone in schools. Before putting the policy in front of the policy committee, Mr. Brady had our legal counsel look over the policy, which was a good thing because it reduced its size by about a third in terms of the number of pages. The policy provides definitions of what constitutes sex discrimination, how it's reported, grievance process, how an investigation into a complaint is handled, duties of the Title IX coordinator, whistleblower protections, anti-sexual harassment training, record keeping, the whole schmeal. In our policy, the HR assistant is going to serve as the Title IX coordinator and would be a lead investigator where there would be a complaint. It's worth noting that in determining an outcome of a sexual harassment or discrimination complaint, we are proposing to use the preponderance of evidence standard, which is a lesser standard than clear and convincing evidence, which was the other option that we could have chosen, but the legal counsel recommended the lower standard because it lowers liability for the district. Once this policy is approved, it'll be one of like 4 policies that we have on the books dealing with harassment and discrimination. And again, this one's required for us to have on the books because we get federal funds. It's an important policy, so I would encourage you to take a look at the minutes that are in your board run, the policy committee meeting minutes, and have a look at that policy. And if you have any questions, submit them to Mr. Brady, probably. And we should be on path to adopt that next time. Policy committee also looked at some 5,000 series policies. We're almost done with those. A couple of transportation related policies, including 5730, school bus safety, which we approved just a month or so ago here at our board meeting. But we added some language on seatbelt usage and railroad crossings that were in other separate policies. So we're including that language in the same policy that we passed before. So we're almost finished with 5,000 series. They'll be on to the 6,000 series, which deals with personnel-related policies. That's it.
Any other questions for Paul, or? If not, Finance Committee, and again, we did our budget, but I don't know if you have anything to add.
Unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions? Okay, Delaney, you got anything from the students today?
It was unfortunate that we did get shut down this week, but I wanted to talk about last week. I just thought it was really good to see new faces and then faces we hadn't seen before in the school. I know you mentioned earlier about wanting to see classrooms up to capacity, and I know that did happen for a few of mine. And even in one of my classes, I'm the only student there. And then due to last week, other students were there with me, so it was just nice to see that learning happening in person. And I know we spoke about music a little bit. I'm not personally in chorus or anything, but I know that for band, we do have special precautions. We have specific PPE for our certain instruments, so we are able to conduct that smoothly. And then as far as student council goes, the overall school student council, we haven't really worked on anything new yet, and we're not having a meeting until after break. But I did see that we got class student councils running again, which we did not have before January. And then lastly, we are just trying to get more student connection happening through tutoring or just Zoom calls and stuff like that. But that's all I have.
Any questions for Delaney? Okay, I do have just a couple items. The upcoming BOCES annual meeting, that is going to be Monday, April 19th, so we will incorporate a regular board meeting along with that. And at that time, we would elect any new board members to the BOCES board, and we would also approve or disapprove of their administrative budget at that time. So along with that, we do have Roger Bennett as a representative from our area. So we would not nominate another person from our district, but if there's other people that would be worth nominating from other areas that anyone here would want to nominate, we could do that at that time, at that meeting. And there was something else. Yes, that's it around there. Any questions about that? All right. I guess I could, if someone would nominate someone, it would be due by March 19th. Okay. I'll turn it over to Mr. Brady then, please.
Okay, I think with the pandemic response update, in the course of the discussion on the athletics, we've gone through most of this in terms of the numbers, and as you know, we were fully remote this past week. Delaney mentioned that. We are, on the bright side, we are getting more of our staff vaccinated as much as we can. Usually the pattern works on Wednesday. I get a call from public health and they say we have X amount of spots that you can go on Friday, and it's in different places. This week it was going to the Ogdensburg Dome. And so then Angie gets on the horn and starts contacting our staff and trying to get as many as we can there. But what we are finding is that many of them who want to get their shots are already getting their first shots. And some of them now their second shot. So that's going along pretty well. Any questions on the communicable disease pandemic plan? This is required under labor law. We talked a bit about this last time, that the new law requires public employers to come up with a plan if there's a future pandemic of how we would keep our employees safe and continue with our operations with our employees. And so I've been working with our district safety chair, Alan Oliver, also our safety officer from Jeff Lewis BOCES. We've also run this by our district safety team. And we've come up with a plan which you have in front of you tonight. I'll just go over the essentials of the plan. Because it will become an addendum to our district safety plan, we are required to have a public hearing on it and a 30-day comment period. So tonight, with this presentation of the plan, we'll start our 30-day comment period, and then at the March board meeting, we'll have a public hearing on it, and then ask the board to approve it. It has to go into place by April 1st. The other requirement was that we shared it with our union leadership. That had to be done by February 4th, and that has been shared. One of our units did ask some questions back, and we went back and forth and had those questions answered. The key elements here, it defines what essential and non-essential is a key part of this. An essential is defined as a public employer contractor who must be physically present to perform his or her job. So an essential worker, as it's defined, is one who has to be on the job, can't work from home. Then we have non-essential workers, which have to be present at work, but we've broken that into 3 different tiers, where tier 1 is where all job duties must be performed fully in person with no exceptions. Tier 2, some of the work can be done at school, some at home, and then tier 3 would be most of it could be done at home, but just come in for minor or emergencies or other exigencies. So we came up with a chart, and it is attached, and we took all of our different jobs that we have, and we categorized them as either essential, or if they're non-essential, they're tier 1, 2, or 3. Again, this is for future, hopefully never, pandemics.
You gotta get through this one first.
I know. We already have a reopening plan for this one. So a couple of others that we have to have in the plan, that they would have access to technology to do their job functions, so we have to have a plan for that. We have to have a plan for avoiding overcrowding when they come into school. They have to have a plan for getting supplies, PPE, disinfectant. The plan has to include daily screening, but under privacy laws. If they do get sick, what are the protocols for that? An isolation room or area, disinfecting and cleaning. What happens if there's a positive case? So all of that's in the plan, which you've seen, and it's for your review, and then we'll post it up on the webpage and give a 30-day period for the public to comment on it. Anybody have questions on the communicable disease pandemic plan? Okay, we'll move on to Susan Lambert. Been waiting a long time. She's our Director of Special Ed, and she's going to brief you on our special education plan. That is a requirement that her and her staff have developed.
It's a long walk here. Hi, everyone. As Pat said, most of you know me here, but if you don't, my name is Susan Lambert. I'm Director of Special Education. I have held this position in Messina for over 20 years. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Special Education District Plan. This plan is provided for your review. I'm sure that all of you have reviewed it, and for hopeful approval tonight. According to the Commissioner's regulation, each Board of Ed must keep a special ed plan on file, make it available for public and commissioner review upon request, and every 2 years we have to review it, update it, and re-present it for approval. The special ed plan pretty much contains a summary of our key programs and different points on special ed. I'm going to review the content, but tell you up front that when I looked at it and I talked to Pat about how do you want me to present this, I could go through it every page, but I thought that would be very painstaking for all of you. especially at, you know, toward the end of such a long meeting. I'm going to review it, and then I'm going to present a few points for consideration that are connected to our district plan. So the content, the plan describes the nature and the scope of our special ed programs. That would be the definition of special education, the CSC purpose of reviewing and recommending services, our individualized education plans, which every student has, and they describe the strengths, the weaknesses, the goals, the programs, the accommodations that the student would have. A definition of disability classifications. The federal government gives us 13 such classifications. The question we have to answer as a team is, what is it that most interferes with a child's successful acquisition of general ed curriculum? You know, what is getting in the way of their learning to the biggest extent possible? And we look at that, and our school psychologists, when they do evaluations, these kinds of questions guide the evaluation that they're going to perform. We have a continuation of services chart in special education. One of the big buzzwords is to provide least restrictive to most restrictive setting of services. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Also, there are identification of numbers of our preschool students, of our school-age students, by grade level, by disability, by program. They are all in there for you to review. Methods of special ed evaluation, plans to ensure appropriate space so that all these services can be provided, alternate formats for instructional materials, and our approximate budget. And also, every year I write 2 federal grants, and the federal grants are outlined there too. So as I said before, I could, you know, go through every page, but I'm not going to do that. A lot of you are sitting here have a lot of expertise on special ed. But I did want to go through a few kind of unique points for consideration. After that, I would be happy to review any questions. I just wanted to give you a very brief, and I promise you it will be brief, history of the origin of special education in New York State, and I'm going to connect it to our plan. A lot of you might be surprised to realize that there were no federal laws protecting special education in the United States until 1975. And that was when Public Law 94-142 was passed, also known as the Education of All Handicapped Students. This was, prior to this, in our country, special education was really hit or miss. It depended upon what state you lived in sometimes, or what district within the state you lived in. Parents could actually be refused services for their children, and the services that were provided were very, the kids were segregated. They weren't included in general ed. A lot of people my age, for instance, never really saw students with special needs within their programs, and that's so critical. Everyone learns when our children with disabilities are mainstreamed as much as possible. So, you know, the families of special ed students, you know, started to obviously get upset because, you know, they're paying taxes, their kids cannot get services. So one of the biggest things about this public law was that special ed students had to be afforded the same access to educational services as their general ed peers. But there were 2 big things that were stressed in this plan over 40 years ago that are in our special education plan now. The first is called FAPE. It is an abbreviation for free and appropriate public education. And that's what guides special ed even to this day. And you see it in our plan. And the second is the least restrictive environment. And in our plan, we have the continuum of services chart where we go from the least restrictive setting to the most restrictive. And it's our responsibility as a Committee on Special Education to try to provide the services for our children in the least restrictive setting possible. So when you look at our services flow chart, our continuum of services, our scope of special education, our disability classifications that are in this plan, they all had their beginnings in this landmark act over 40 years ago. And it's still with us today. The other thing I wanted to discuss was our continuum of services. This is, critical. It's critical to all all programs. What services do you have for your children? Many, many years ago, our special ed department set a goal that as many of our students as possible would receive FAPE within their homeschool communities. We felt that our special ed students were owed that. They should get their services within the home community as much as possible. As a result, our general ed teachers and special ed teachers started developing very innovative programs. And you know, probably, I mean, obviously I'm very proud of our staff and our programs, but I get calls at least every month from other districts saying, I know you have this program or that program, and could you possibly make room for our students? And you know, with Pat's help and permission, we have actually taken students from other districts into our programs. But some of them are, of course, we have and they're described in your plan, our resource services, our consultant teacher services, our 1211, all sorts of related services, OT, PT, speech, counseling, behavior consulting, orientation and mobility for our visually impaired students, teachers of the visually impaired, audiology. We have a 12-1, 3+1, which is a fancy way to say a program in-house for our severe and complex globally delayed students. Most districts don't have that. We have an ABA program for our children with autism. It's a specific type of learning for our students called applied behavior analysis. We have adaptive physical education. You know, this year was the first year we started our district special education preschool, self-contained and integrated programs. We have a high school community-based work program. We have personnel with extensive training dealing with autism spectrum disorders. So the majority of our children, our continuum of services that the plan outlines are right here. We do use BOCES, and we're very lucky to have excellent BOCES programs and at our disposal as well for a few different groups of students for whom programs here just haven't been beneficial. Those two groups are our significantly behaviorally involved students and our very significantly involved students with autism, although most of our students with autism are educated right here in-house. So, you know, I know all of you have had time to review the plan. I know I'm rushing a little bit through the presentation, but I was hoping that you might have some questions for me that I could answer, or if I can't answer it today, I could get the answer. If you don't, that's fine too.
Susan, you've got the federal grant allocations broken
Yes.
out. I guess those are the grants that you write?
Correct.
How much of the, you know, $9.9 million that the district spends on special education is covered by state aid? Is that, do you know that figure?
Well, the $9.9 million, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but our federal grants do cover some of that money, do cover salary and benefits, not of all special ed personnel, but some, supplies and materials, you know, travel and conference, and those sorts of things.
I guess I was surprised that there was so little federal money compared to the overall cost of the program.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that question. Could you answer it, Nick?
The federal money is the IDEA grants.
They're the two grants we, yeah, we just.
Mm-hmm. But as far as general fund, federal funding is very low.
Okay, so I guess you don't really know what the state picks up as far as the actual special ed budget. It's just part of the overall aid that the district gets.
It's the high cost, excess cost aid categories that would specifically relate to it.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know that exact number.
You mentioned that, and I was skimming through the plan, but something about taking in students from other districts?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We tuition in students from other districts.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
We
Thanks.
tuition them in, yeah.
Okay. I caught the taking in students from other districts. I missed
Well,
that part.
I should have been more specific there, Kevin. We
Okay.
don't, yeah.
Thanks.
I'm just, you know, talking about how innovative these programs are that we have. Our continuum of services is very unique and a lot different than what you might see in other locations.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
yeah. Okay, well, if you have questions, you can certainly
Actually, that does lead me to
let
another
Pat know.
question. So what's the rate that we tuition them in at? Do we tuition them in at the regular education rate, or is there a different rate for special education rates? Is there any distinction therein with how we do that?
There's an agreed upon, Nick could probably answer this question.
It's a custom rate based on a specific classroom, so it's adding up all the cost of salaries and benefits of the teachers, the assistants, the aides, directly related with the student tuition, and any related services are also charged up.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay,
Thanks,
well,
Susan.
you could always let Pat know if you have questions, he'd get them to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's on for board approval. Next on the list is the draft calendar for 21-22. You all have a copy of that. It's gone through the calendar committee at the regional level, and now it's being presented for your approval as it is every year. 186-day calendar, that means 6 days of emergency days, which is about average for us. School we'd have a couple days staff development in September, and then that Friday, the 3rd, would be the first day of school, and then the long weekend into Labor Day weekend. The difference this year, one of the differences this year is the new state holiday, Juneteenth, which falls on June 19th, but because that's a Sunday, it's going to fall on the 20th. So that's usually a date that's a Regent's Day. We didn't add a Regent's Day, but initially the state had Thursday the 23rd as our last day, which is always called Rating Day. We urged them, and they did listen to us, and they did change that to Friday the 24th. And that allowed us to have that extra day in there because the new holiday was limiting our 186-day calendar. So that's in there. Spring break is tied to, you can see in April is later, the 15th to the 22nd. We try to keep that consistent with the other counties around us that we play sports with, because spring sports is always very challenging to get the games in. So that is consistent with the counties around us. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward and normal calendar.
What's the thought process behind having the first day of school on a Friday and then a long weekend? Like, what's the reasoning they did that?
Well, often so you've got a couple of choices there. We want to have 186 days, so we know the end is the 24th of June, and we know where we can begin.
Okay.
So in between, we got to get those days in. So what you could do is you could back, there's a couple of choices you could do. You could back up the staff development days if you want to keep 2 days to August 31st. And the 1st, and then you could start with 2 days, which we have traditionally done. This is the first time. We've just done the one. Usually it's 2 days before. And you could get 187 days out of that, or you could cut a day off somewhere else. We are allowed to start 2 days in August for staff. We try to avoid it. Staff generally doesn't like starting in August, and my thought was, coming off the pandemic, starting in September might be the better way to go with school. If you start after Labor Day, then you're going to have to cut off some other break time somewhere in order to make up and get back to that 186 days. So those are our constraints that we were working through.
How does the calendar line up with the other districts?
In-
Because everybody sends to BOCES typically, so
Yeah.
if you start before or after,
I think they were all going to, I think they were all this year gonna go with that calendar, I believe. I think.
Okay.
I know there's some districts that they can't start in August, it's in their contract, that they can't. But I believe when we were all said and done, this year, as opposed to the previous couple of years, everybody was gonna follow this calendar, I believe.
okay, thanks.
The only thing would be if anybody down in the southern part of the county wanted to get an extra day. So that's always the push and pull. Down near Governor, that area of the county, they want 187 days because.
Well, they end up having worse weather.
Correct.
Typically, so, yeah.
Up here,
Yep.
we don't. So I don't know, I haven't answered that question. I think they were also going with the 186, but.
But they probably are lining themselves up because they send to a different BOCES. Well, maybe, but
That they send to a different BOCES?
they send to Southwest
Oh, they
Tech.
send Southwest
Yeah.
Tech, yeah, yep. Okay. The PALS transportation, or no, the health insurance meeting that we had yesterday, just briefly, it's a good, good meeting. Our numbers are looking pretty good. It's also workman's comp. Workman's comp, they're not looking for an increase next year. This is always the meeting, we set the rates for the following year. Workman's comp, because of the pandemic, they've seen less cases of workman's comp during the pandemic. It was last year, so they were able to save some money. This year, the first quarter was higher, but part of that was they were paying off a couple of large claims. So overall, they're feel that they're a pretty healthy fund balance, and they're not looking for any increase in workman's comp rates for next year. In terms of health insurance, with our flex plan, the federal stimulus bill is going to allow some more leeway for people to use their flex plan money. They can, if you're a rollover school where you roll over $500 to the next year because you haven't been able to use it. For those of you not aware, our flex plan, you can put your money in a pre-tax. You go to the doctor, whatever the insurance doesn't cover, you can take the money out of there. You go to the dentist, whatever the dentist doesn't cover, you can take it out of this pre-tax plan and use that money. It's your money. But if you don't use it by the end of the year, you either have to roll some over if you're allowed, or you get more time, like 3 more months. We're a school where we don't have the rollover of the money, but you have 3 more months in order to use it at the end. But now they're gonna, for those who roll it over, you're gonna be able to roll over any amount for next year because of COVID, because people are not, there's not elective surgeries, people aren't going to their doctor, so they're not, or their dentist in many cases, so they're not able to use that pre-tax money. And this is a federal law, so the feds have to be the ones that allow for this to occur, and now they are. For us, we're a school where we allow that grace time. That's been extended from 3 months to a year, that employers can use that money that they had put aside for medical and dental, and childcare expenses are part of this as well. So that was a big thing. And the last, when I get into health insurance, as far as our plan is concerned, we have not had a lot of cases where our employees have had to be hospitalized with COVID, and they're not getting the elective surgeries, and they're not, going to the doctor. So the plan since the last year with the pandemic has been saving some money on insurance. Now, there is a concern that once this year things get back to normal, well, it's a concern in one way. On the financial side, we got to be prepared for it. But we want people to be going to get their checkups. And this is another concern, is if they're not getting their checkups and going to the doctor, that could lead to longer term issues, which then is bad for the employee and bad for the health insurance plan. So they have built those the budget together based on that. We also had the withdrawal of a couple of school districts last year. 3 of them over the last couple of years, and a couple of them were running at a loss. So actually that has, according to the report, that's kind of helped the plan. We've now fully gone over to Excelis from our, instead of the plan administration office, so that was discussed. And so at the end of the day, with all of that, they're looking at a 2% increase in health insurance plan. The industry average right now is about 3.5% to 5% increase in premium. They were looking at a 2%, and they feel with the level of fund balance we've now been able to, because of the savings through this pandemic period, that we could be looking over the next year, maybe a couple of years, where we wouldn't have, where we could be at that lower level of increase in the health insurance. And as Nick reported to finance and I showed you tonight, health insurance is one of our biggest costs, and if we're not having to put big increases in there, it's helpful to the bottom line. That's the main point. Any questions? PALS, that's our Boys and Girls Police Athletic League. They had put in a request at the last minute for a bus to Titus. They've now today did pull that request. But the bigger question is, we're going to start to get these requests to rent our buses, and they're kind of wondering if the board is going to be amenable to allowing that to occur for students.
So they did pull their request?
They did pull their request, so we will take that up.
As long as they're following guidelines. Right?
Would we, I mean, one thing I would suggest is that they would have to sanitize the bus when the trip's done. That work shouldn't fall on us.
Unless they're paying our bus driver to do it, right? So part of the duty at this point.
Well, I would say, yeah, they're paying us for the bus and, for the driver.
This goes back to the consistency argument. We're gonna allow kids to get on a bus for basketball games,
Yeah.
hockey games. We gotta let them get on a bus for these kind of activities.
We had a parent cafe last week, one of our parent cafes as part of our community schools, and they had 3 breakout rooms. They came back together, and the one thing that parents were asking for was activities, for the kids, but at this point outside. And so these types of activities where they're taking them up to, 15 kids up to Titus, I'd like to, if we are going to support the others, I would like to see us support this as well.
If we allow this and they pay our driver, in the event that driver gets sick and he would have to be not working, like how would that?
That's the risk, well, we haven't had any drivers, like I said earlier, where somebody's gotten on the bus and spread it to the driver. So the risk there at this point has been very low. It's the quarantine. So now you have a driver that's in quarantine and can't drive our regular school run. That's the risk that as more and more of hopefully we're going to see more and more of our drivers getting vaccinated. That will be helpful because CDC is coming out and saying that they don't have to quarantine, as I said before. So we're not looking at this tonight, but hopefully by the time they ask again, that we'll be in a better position where we can send a driver who has been vaccinated and doesn't have to run that risk. And that would be our goal.
Is that going to run into seniority issues?
Yeah.
I would suggest all bus drivers get an appointment and get vaccinated. If they are eligible and they can go get an appointment.
We'll cross that bridge.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it won't, but we'll
Right. Yeah.
cross that bridge. Okay, thank you. They'll be happy with that. And then we have the donations to the district. Again, we greatly appreciate all of the donations that we get from Home Depot, from Hess Trucking and from National, Alcoa and the National Wildlife Federation. That's it.
Our business group's up. Nick, if you want to fire away.
Yep, so the first thing I have tonight is the budget status report. So far, year to date, we brought in $25.3 million. We've expended $22.2 million and have $28.2 million remaining for the rest of the year. Just one budget transfer on there to the report. One tax correction that you also saw last time, but the individual made another payment, so an additional refund is due. And then treasurer's report for January, started the month with $37.4 million, brought in $3.3 million, including some CARES Act money from the federal incentive. Dispersed $4.4 million, ended the month at $36.3 million. For the general claims report, there were 7 warrants totaling $4.2 million with 0 errors. And for BOCES, there was 1 warrant totaling $1.9 million and 0 errors.
Thanks, Nick. Any questions for Nick? Okay, we can move on to recommended actions. First item for approval tonight is athletic safety plan for winter sports.
So moved.
Second.
So let's, I guess, I don't know if you guys want my 2 cents or not, but I guess I'll throw it out there. I struggled with this, whether we should, approve it or not. I guess 2 things have made me decide to be for it. One is just the, the breadth and the detail and the safety plan, and the other is just personal. Having, as Lauren said, I played a couple sports throughout high school. And if I put myself in the shoes as a senior, it wouldn't even have to be a senior, just a student, I would want to play sports, and I wouldn't have any problem with doing all the safety protocols that are required just so I could play my sport. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know if anybody else, we have any more discussion, pro or not so pro. Okay, I guess so, show of hands. All those in favor of approving the athletic plan for the winter? And against?
Robert, what's Robert?
Against, okay. Robert's nay.
So it does pass. Thank you. Next item, approval of the special education plan.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion or questions? All those in favor? Okay, everyone, thank you. Approval of the school calendar for 2021-22.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to policies, the first group is review only. Policy 5732, transportation to child safety zones. Policy 5740, use of buses by community groups. Policy 5741, passengers on a school bus. And policy 5753, school bus idling, previously number 5731. So.
No, that's actually being renumbered to 5731.
Down
Just,
below.
I think that was to be consistent with the Erie 1 policies.
So we're rescinding 5731
Right.
below. Okay. Anyway, those are for review only. Can I have a motion, please? Second. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Next group of policies are first readings. Policy 3421, Title IX and sex discrimination. policy 5730, school bus safety program, and policy 5760, qualifications of bus drivers. Motion, please. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, thanks. And the last group are to rescind, and their policies 5731, transportation to babysitters, policy 5751, seatbelts, and policy 5752, unguarded railroad crossing. Motion, please. Any more discussion? Can I get a second?
Yeah, second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Next one would be approval of the donations to the district.
So moved.
And thank you for the donations, all those groups. Any more discussion?
That request was withdrawn. You're welcome.
All those in favor? The donations, thanks.
See your mini-me?
Approval of the budget status report, please. Motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of the budget transfer report.
Second.
All those in favor?
You're done.
Approval of the tax correction.
Second.
Any questions on that? All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of the treasurer's report for January 2021.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Thanks. Approval of the internal claims audit report general, January 2021.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of the internal claims audit report for BOCES 2021, January.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. And approval of the CSE CPSE report. All those in favor? Thank you. Personnel actions.
Thanks, Pat. I'm recommending items 1 through 22 on the personnel actions list.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. New business from any board members?
I didn't plan on it, but I do think it is important for us to explore other extracurricular activities and how they can be done safely. I think it's only fair that all kids get an opportunity, not just those who are in athletics. And some of those things, like the musical that I mentioned earlier, there are seniors in those programs as well who are never going to get another opportunity. They don't always get the advocacy, which saddens me, but I'll be their advocate, and I think it would be ridiculous for us not to find a way for them to have a musical if we're allowing sports to go on. And they come up with a safety plan, and it could be done safely as well with a musical. There's all different kinds of musicals, from small cast to large casts. It can be live streamed. Other schools have done it. And that's just one example. Paul brought it up. There's many extracurricular activities that our kids benefit from, and we should be finding ways.
Is there live streaming, there are copyright issues?
They are allowing it. My daughter did it trained for carousel last semester.
There are some that are allowed to be live streamed, others are not.
Just a point of it, we do have some extracurriculars we're doing online. There is yearbook and there is student council and some of the other ones that we are doing. But at this point, bringing students together, it was not even considered until the high-risk winter sports came up, because we were at the height of the pandemic. We didn't quite even see that coming, that it was going to happen on, as I said, on the
Yeah, that was driven by the governor's statement.
Right, so it's a point well taken, Lauren, and we can go back and revisit now and see what else we could do maybe with the music department and others.
And the
Can we get
governor
a-
wants to see Broadway open back up again too, so.
We just,
So
can we get a list of what extracurriculars are running and what isn't? Or some update on that? I mean, is that,
yeah,
Just-
well, you've appointed, yeah, I can, yeah.
okay, thanks.
Anything else? If not, I guess we'll get a motion to adjourn, please.
Second.
All those in favor?
We weren't gonna discuss it?
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Good night.